The Vietnam War was a conflict fought from 1964 to 1973 between the communist state of North Vietnam and a United States-backed South Vietnam. The Vietnam War was part of the Cold War. America's objective was to defeat the Soviet and Chinese-backed North Vietnamese and prevent the enslavement of Southeast Asia to communism. At the beginning of the war, the majority of the American people supported military action in Vietnam. Many were willing to sacrifice for this noble cause. Over 9 million military personnel served on active duty during the Vietnam era. About 2,007,000 American men and women served in Vietnam combat roles. Over the course of the war, 58,000 U.S. military members lost their lives, and more than 153,000 were wounded. It wasn't long before America grew weary of seeing her sons returning home in body bags. Thousands of American citizens took to the streets to express the nation's overwhelming desire to either win or end the war. The years of the Vietnam War witnessed a major shift in American opinion, and presidents pledged to bring the troops home.
I will try with best I can with everything I've got to end this battle and to return our sons to their desires.
Even excluding the Vietnam War, the 1960s and the 1970s were some of the most tumultuous times in the history of America. But just how did the Vietnam War change our country?
Where do you want me to start?
I don't know much about Vietnam War. After it come back, I kind of blocked it out.
Well, I think the Vietnam War, along with the 60s, that whole 60s thing has changed this country to what we have today.
It's opened up a lot of eyes, and hopefully it'll tell the government don't get into any more hassles.
It didn't change it enough. I think that for a long time I thought that given the experience of Vietnam, we sure as heck won't ever do that again.
The effects of the Vietnam War are controversial even today, but many agree that the Vietnam War brought many changes to our country. By the time the last U.S. troops left Vietnam in 1973, America was divided and politicians were shaken. The Vietnam War caused many Americans to lose their trust in the national government. But perhaps most significantly, the Vietnam War clearly taught America that political will, as much as military might, is a decisive factor in the outcome of war. It was a hard pill to swallow for many Americans when the United States failed to accomplish its objectives in Vietnam. And sadly, for many years, much of the embittered public viewed the veterans who served in Vietnam not as the heroic soldiers that they were, but as symbols of America's defeat.
Wow, we couldn't get it into, I don't think we could get it into our heads that we sent 550,000 men to Vietnam only to not really win the war. You know, that's the way the American people, I think, looked at it. And socially, well, I'll tell you what, it was all tied into the 60s. You know, there were a lot of other things going on in the United States at that time, and it kind of all tied together. You know, it wasn't just the Vietnam War, it was a big social upheaval. It wasn't long after that when Watergate happened and the U.S. just came to a standstill and society changed. You know, we kind of changed again. Like I said, we didn't really start to respect the military till the first Gulf War. And all of a sudden everybody went, wow, these guys are professional, they have overwhelming military strength, so we're going to welcome those guys home. Those guys got the welcome that the Vietnam vets never got.
Remember the devotion and gallantry with which all of them ennobled their nation as they became champions of a noble cause. I'm not speaking provocatively here. Unlike the other wars of this century, of course, there were deep divisions about the wisdom and rightness of the Vietnam War. And yet, after more than a decade of desperate boat people, after the killing fields of Cambodia, after all that has happened in that unhappy part of the world, who can doubt that the cause for which our men fought was just? It was, after all, however imperfectly pursued, the cause of freedom, and they showed uncommon courage in its service.